Hey there, it's July of 2015 and welcome to this edition of Take 5 with Tony. Today we're going to talk about another false choice, and this is a big one. It's either genetically modified foods or world hunger. You might have heard this. I know I've heard it a lot from pundits and others. In fact, over the last couple of months, I've heard it from a couple of my elected representatives. I had written them, both a Democrat and a Republican, expressing support for labeling laws that would allow consumers to know when foods have genetically modified ingredients. Both wrote back expressing some concerns about GMOs, but their bottom line was almost identical. They felt we had to consider using GMOs because we have to be able to fight world hunger. So see, this is the underlying notion, this is the foundation of the argument for GMO foods, that they yield much more than traditionally bred varieties, and as a result, they offer hope for solving world hunger. This is what we've been hearing. Now, in future segments, I'm going to talk about many other issues and the science related to GMOs, but let's focus now on this question of yield. GMO crops have been commercially available for a little over 20 years. They've been in research and development for well over 3 decades. And during that time, there's been one single trait that has dominated all of the genetic modification work, and it has been herbicide resistance. You might have heard of Roundup Ready corn or soybeans. This has been the primary trait that folks have worked on in GMO crops. So much so that Roundup Ready corn and soybean seed varieties now constitute over 90% of all the soybeans and nearly 90% of all the commercial corn planted in the United States. What about yield increases, though? Well, 2 studies shed light on this. One is from the Union of Concerned Scientists, the other from Washington State University. Both of them found that over all of this period of time, 20 plus years, the increase in yield is marginal at best. In fact, in some years, they've seen slightly higher yields with GMO varieties compared with traditionally bred hybrids. In other years, slightly less. The Washington State study, it looked at 20 years of trials from 1990 to 2010, and they found that overall, the yield on average from GMO varieties was about 3% more than traditional varieties. 3%, that's about 6 bushels of corn per acre. Now, what do farmers have to do to get those additional 6 bushels per acre? First of all, they spend much more on seeds. GMO seeds cost between 65% and 100% more, double what the cost is for hybrid seeds that farmers would use that are nearly as productive. And they've had to apply a lot more herbicide. So far, in the 2 decades of GMO crops, we've seen about 500 million pounds of additional herbicides used in American corn and soybean and other fields as a result of these GMO crops. So to date, very small increases in yield. But proponents of genetically modified foods say that they're working on drought tolerance, that soon they'll have drought-tolerant varieties that will allow farmers, especially in poorer countries, to be able to bring the crops in no matter how severe the conditions. Well, we do know that people using traditional breeding methods, both open-pollinated and hybrids, have been able to increase drought tolerance of a number of different varieties. But in more than 3 decades of research, development, and commercialization of GMO crops, there has not yet been a single crop released that shows drought tolerance. It turns out it's a lot more complicated to breed that in through genetic modification than is herbicide resistance. There is another way to get drought tolerance, and that is building soil organic matter. A 2012 study from Nature magazine found that the single best way to increase the drought tolerance of all kinds of crops was to increase organic matter through cover cropping, manures, legumes, and minimize tillage. The very practices that sustainable and organic farmers commonly use and that are quite uncommon on large monoculture farms using GMO varieties. So the next time you hear an expert or a pundit or a politician tell you, we've got to have GMOs to fight world hunger, tell them it's a false choice and we're not willing to make it. Thanks a lot, and see you next time.